They warned us simple. If the woods speak your name from behind you, don't turn. If a ledger opens itself, don't touch. If the hill's breath meets yours, don't lend it a single lungful. 3 true Appalachian accounts test every rule. A search and rescue volunteer follows a missing man's trail into a laurel hell and hears his own voice come over the radio before he says a word. A shuttered company store wakes, rings its little bell, and prints a receipt with a red line where coin should be, charging interest in breath. And a ridge above a sealed drift begins to weep red after dark, matching the beat in your throat and tapping from the vents when you get home. There are no monsters leaping from closets here. There is patience, imitation, and debt. If you're brave enough to keep listening, lock your door, keep your lips closed, and count with us. The tunes finish themselves. The drawers open on their own. The hill already knows your rhythm, and before the end, it will try your name on its tongue. Folks in our mountains say if you hear someone whistling after dark, don't answer. I grew up laughing at that. Then one October night, in a place we call the Laurel Hell, I did. And I still hear it when I try to sleep. I'm a volunteer with our county's search and rescue. We don't get many calls, but when we do, it's always the same kind of trouble. The ridges look friendly from the road. Then you step off into the green and it eats the light, the sound, and your sense of where your feet are. That night we were looking for a retired miner who went out to pick chanterelles and never came back. The call came at dusk, with fog already pooling in the hollers like cold milk. "Keep your radio on channel 2, our coordinator said. "Mark your track with tape. No cowboys, no hero crap." I checked my pack, flagging tape, spare batteries, first aid kit, extra water, and started up the spine of the ridge with my headlamp low and warm. The rain had moved through a few hours before, and every rhododendron leaf held a perfect bead of water like an eye. When the wind pushed, the whole mess, the laurel, the hemlocks, the ferns, leaned and rubbed together. It sounded like breath trying to learn words. There's a section up there that folks call a laurel hell for a reason. The thickets grew up after a burn, 10 feet high and woven together hard as fence wire. You don't walk through it so much as wiggle, and the path comes and goes, a goat track that wants you to lose your patience. I'd flagged it before, but tape disappears out there. Hunters take it down. The wind does too, or something else does. Halfway in, the woods thinned just enough for the sounds to spread out. An owl called, that laughing bark of a barred owl who cooks for you. Crickets chattered. The creek on my right mumbled rock to rock. And somewhere ahead, faint, I heard someone whistle a tune I knew from church when I was a kid. "Come, thou fount," only slower, just the skeleton of it. A few notes, a pause, a few more. I stopped dead. "Hello," I called out, trying to make it practical, nothing to do with old mountain stories. "Search and rescue, if you can hear me, whistle again." The whistle answered, same notes, same pauses, only this time it sounded behind me. I spun and aimed my light through the shamrock leaves and the black laurel tunnels. Nothing but green and dark and the pale bones of dead blowdomes. The fog had crept up off the creek and clung to my ankles like a cat. I took in a breath and tasted copper, like I'd bit my tongue. "All right," I said into the mic low. "I've got a whistle response on the north side of the ridge. Could be our subject." Static chewed the reply, then I heard our coordinator. "Copy, keep marking, don't break line of travel." I tore a strip of orange tape and tied it to a branch, my fingers dumb and slow. The knot, my knot, the way I always do it, felt like it took a minute too long to hold. I kept moving. Every 50 paces, another tape. The whistle came again and I felt a weird relief. Someone was close, someone human. I walked into a pocket of air that smelled like wet rock and something sweet, spoiled like fruit left in a truck bed. The light bounced off a rusted length of barbed wire grown into a tree. There was a jacket draped over it, hunter orange, clean and bright, like it had just been hung up. "Hello," I said, softer. "Sir, you hurt." I touched the jacket. It was warm. My scalp crawled. "Is anyone with you?" I asked, louder, backing my light around. On the ground under the jacket, Small piles of white stone stacked 3, then one stack broken like something stepped on it on purpose. In the bark of the birch beside me, lines had been carved. Not letters, just tally marks close together. A whole winter of days cut into wood. I clicked the radio. Found a jacket. Orange, looks recent. No blood, no sign of a fall. I glanced up the ridge. The whistle came from my left, 10 feet away. The exact notes I'd heard when I was 8 and Grandpa whistled in the porch swing. I moved the light and caught a shape in the laurel tunnel, pale, rounded. For a second I thought, skull. I blinked, and it was only a knot in a log, shiny from sap. "Don't answer it," my grandma used to say. "If something calls your name after dark, that ain't for you." She never said anything about tunes. The radio crackled. Then in my own voice, soft and grainy, it said, "Sir, you hurt." I froze. The mic was in my hand. My lips were shut. I heard the line click in my ear as if someone pressed a button. And then again, in that same copy of me, it said, "Is anyone with you?" The jacket on the barbed wire twitched, just once, like breath inside it. Something moved through the laurel on my right, slow and careful, as if it had watched me move and was trying to match me. A leaf brushed my arm with a cold, wet kiss. I stepped back and my boot sank into something spongy that gave a little squeal, like a wet toy, then stayed quiet. I didn't dare look down. "Show me your hands," I heard myself say on the radio, calm, professional. I hadn't said it yet. The whistle came from the darkness right over my shoulder, so close I felt the warmth of it hit the back of my ear. And then whatever it was leaned close, close enough that its lips, or something that thought it had lips, touched my skin, and it finished the last 4 notes I hadn't dared to answer. The breath on my ear was warm and wrong, sweet like bruised apples with a metal taste under it, as if the air had come through a pipe. I flinched and swung the light. The tunnel of laurel shivered like something slipped through it just ahead of my beam. Nothing stood there. No man, just wet leaves shining like eyes. My radio clicked, though my hand wasn't on the mic. In my own voice I heard, "Don't turn around." Every hair on my neck went up. I took a step anyway. I made myself walk, slow, careful, like a man edging past a sleeping dog. The jacket on the barbed wire puffed, then sagged, like the last of a breath leaving it. "Unit on the north side, you're doubling." My coordinator's voice broke through, thin with static. "Keying without talking. Check your button." "Copy," I said, trying to steady my breath. "Interference, marking and backing out." "Affirmative. Come out the way you came," she said. The whistle started again, almost playful now. Those church notes dragged out, fading into the gray between trees. It came from the way I'd come in, then from my left, then right by my mouth. On the last note, it matched the exact wheeze in my breath. "Search and rescue," I called, out of anger more than anything. "If that's you, knock it off. Come to my light." Something in the leaves just beyond my reach gave a soft, wet squeal. I told myself it was a frog. I didn't look. I tore another strip of tape with my teeth and tied it in my knot. My fingers shook so bad I had to do it twice. The tape felt warm, like it had been in someone's pocket. I took 5 careful steps back down the path I remembered. 6, 7. The fog wrapped my calves. The creek on my right kept talking rocks. A birch with tally marks on it slid by in my light, only there were more marks now. I had to have imagined that. My mind was making tricks. Behind me, in my own voice, the radio said, "This way." I stopped and stared at it. The little red light wasn't even on. I could hear myself breathing through the tiny speaker, a half-second late, like an echo in a tunnel. Then, in a flat whisper, my voice added a thing I hadn't said yet. "I see you." I didn't, not really. What I saw were pale shapes that resolved into knots. Those stacks of white stones under the jacket 3 had been in a tidy triangle. Now one stack was back, rebuilt, each stone wet and shining. I hadn't touched them. "North Unit, check in." The real coordinator again, a sound that made me want to cry with relief. "Still moving," I said. Hearing voices, whistling, I might have radio issues. "Markin' back out," she said, firm. "No cowboy stuff." On the word back, a pull came on my wrist. My tape had snagged my cuff, looped somehow and cinched. Not the loose hitch I always tie. A tight slip knot I didn't know. It tugged toward the laurel, just enough pressure to move my skin, just enough to say, "Come along." I cut it with my knife. When the blade snapped through, the free end didn't fall. It hissed away into the dark like someone had gathered it up. I didn't think. I dropped my pack and went low, shoulder into the green, and pushed. The laurel fought me with hands made of wet sticks. It whispered like paper rubbed together. The tune came again. I kept my light down so it didn't blind me with steam off my own breath. I felt the path under my boots change from soft rot to pebbles. The sound of water got louder. The creek. I scrambled down the bank and stepped in. It was cold as a grave, and it cleared the sugar smell out of my nose. The whistle faltered and tried to become the creek. It gurgled the notes, broken, then quit. "Blowing whistle 3, I said, voice small in the bottomland. I put the rescue whistle in my teeth and blew hard, 3 long blasts. The sound went up and got swallowed by fog. Something answered from up the draw. 3 blasts, perfect. Then from behind me, 3 more, close enough to feel on my neck. "Hold position," the coordinator cracked. "We're sending a light team down from the fire road. Stay where you are." "I am," I lied. I could not stand still in that water. I moved along the creek downstream where it has to find the road eventually. The bank narrowed and the laurel leaned in and the water deepened around my thighs. The cold hurt and the hurt helped. The whistle tried 3 more times and got weaker. A light moved through the fog ahead, white and steady, with that human shake to it. Then I heard my name in a voice I knew too well. It was our oldest member, Buddy, who taught me the ridges when I was a kid. He called, "Keep talking to me," the way he always did. "Here," I yelled, "in the creek." From behind me, in that exact same drawl, I heard, "Here, in the creek." I froze. Buddy cussed, a good sign because I knew exactly how he cussed. "Don't answer the echo," he said. "Come to my light, eyes, not ears." I watched his light and walked to it. The other voice stayed behind me and kept saying the same 2 words, "here, here," like it was learning them. I did not look back. I stepped into a bank of briars and let them scratch me because they were real. Buddy's hand found my jacket and hauled. We got out. I stood on the fire road and cried like a kid. They wrapped me in a blanket. My pack came up later, hooked on a fallen limb. The orange jacket came too, carried by a rookie who wouldn't meet my eyes. Inside the pocket was a hunting license with the missing miner's name and last year's date. The fabric was still damp and warm. We never found the man. The search went on for days. Dogs wouldn't go into that laurel hell. They all sat down at the edge and whined. At night at base, the radios clicked and coughed to life by themselves. On the log, it shows my call sign broadcasting from the North Ridge until 2:13 a.m., saying phrases I remember saying and some I never did. One of them was my grandma's voice. One of them was my coach from high school. They all tried our names slow, like tasting them. I took a week off. I told myself it was stress. First night home, around 11, I heard 3 long whistles from the dark behind my trailer. My porch chimes didn't move. No wind. I didn't go out. I sat on the floor with my back to the fridge until dawn. Next morning, there was a strip of orange tape tied to my back doorknob. My knot, tight and neat. It was damp. When I untied it, it was warm, like it had been on someone's skin. And when I hold it up to my ear just for a second, I swear it breathes. I used to laugh when old-timers said the company store could still send a bill. Then I went to clean out the one at Stonecap Hollow, and I heard my granddad's name come out of a ledger that hadn't been opened in 50 years. I haul junk for banks, foreclosures, bankruptcies, estate cleanouts. If it's got a do not enter sign and a smell, they call me. The county landed a grant to stabilize historical sites. which meant pay a local like me to empty the old Stonecap Coal Company store before the roof collapsed and lawyers sniffed around. I grew up downriver. My granddad, Levi Harlan, cut coal at number 3 until a bad roof took his buddy. He lived long enough to cough himself to sleep most nights. Mom moved us away. I swore I wouldn't come back, but money's money. And the store sat at the head of a holler no one went up anymore, past a tangle of kudzu and poplar and those greenbrier vines that grab your socks and don't let go. The place looked like a church that forgot what it prayed for. 2 stories of gray boards and cloudy glass. The porch sagged, and the old fan house behind it had rusted half away, but when the wind slipped down the draw, you could still hear the fan hum a little, like a jaw clacking in its sleep. The woods pressed tight around it. Hemlock, laurel, slick wet rock. Everything smelled like damp paper and coal. At the gas station, an old man with nicotine fingers said, "Don't take nothing that jingles." He smiled without humor. The store still collects. I laughed like it was a joke, but my chest felt tight all the same. Inside, dust lay like flour over everything. The counters were glass cases with jar rings and old candy wrappers stuck to them. Shelves sagged with jars of nails, rolls of Bradis cloth, hard hats with dry-rotted straps, a row of white baby shoes gone gray. On the far wall hung a slate board with names and numbers written faint in chalk. McCree, Sutter, Bell, little debts and bigger ones. Someone had drawn a line through the bottom row like the tide rose there. By the door hung a wooden board with hooks and brass tags half tarnished, each stamped with a number. Check tags, miners hung them when they went in. My fingers brushed one and left a clean fingerprint on its face. Number 47. It was warm. That made no sense. There was a ledger on the counter, leather dark as rain. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now. But I pulled it close by the spine, and the smell that came out of it felt like a cellar turned inside out, mildew and iron and something sweet and rotten. A pencil lay in the crack like it had been put down mid-figure and never picked back up. When I opened the book, the pages were water-wavy and written in a clerk's tight hand. Columns for scrip, coal loads, candles, beans, flour, funeral cloth. Names I recognized from headstones and a few I knew from taxes. When I turned a page, the pencil rolled a little, stopped, and then twitched back toward the margin like a bug. Somewhere deeper in the store, I heard the faintest tick, like an adding machine. 2 ticks, then 3. A bell rang once, not loud. That particular cash register ring every store used to have. There was no power. I was alone. I told myself sound travels weird in big, empty places. I started boxing what we could resell. I found a coffee can full of brass script tokens. Stonecap Coal Co., good for 5 cents in trade only, all stamped around with a hole to string them. They clinked soft like teeth in a glass. I scooped a handful and the cold leached out of them quick, like they learned my skin and liked it. I dropped most into a box. One stuck to my palm. I had to pry it off. When I did, a ring of coal-black powder sat on my skin like I'd burned myself. It smelled like metal and old sugar. The slate board whispered. Not a word, more like chalk thinking about writing. I looked. The faint names had smeared as if someone's sleeve brushed them, and at the very bottom where the line used to be, the space was clean. A fresh square of slate waited. I watched a line appear there, slow as a snail track. Letters shaped themselves in a kid's careful hand. Harlan. Then, balance carried. Very funny, I said out loud because silence was worse. The fan house answered with a breath that came cold through the cracks under the back door. It smelled like damp rock and carbide lamps. The ledger flipped itself, pages sighing. The pencil rolled to the crease. It lifted just a hair as if the paper had a pulse. I backed toward the door. The air felt heavy. My ears rang, then popped. Somewhere under the floor, wood creaked like it had weight on it. I told myself to quit, to come back in daylight with a crew. I put the coffee can of tokens on the counter and slid the ledger shut. The register drawer slammed open with a bang that made me jump. Inside, where old bills should be, lay a neat stack of little papers, all blank except for a red line at the bottom. A receipt spool on the back creaked and fed another inch. It printed one word in red pencil like a tongue licking a lip. Do. Something tapped the window. 3 taps slow. I turned and saw nothing but my face and the woods pressed up against the glass. The brass tags on the board by the door tinked together like a breeze had hit them. No breeze touched my skin. Then the counting started, not out loud. It was in the scale by the counter, the one with the little weights and trays. The arm ticked up then down, like it weighed breath. Each time the needle slid a hair closer to heavy. The cold back door draft swelled and pushed soft steam out my mouth. I could see it. I could see it leave me and drift toward the register like a moth to a lamp. "Granddad," I heard myself say, because the cough in that draft was his old cough. Levi. The pencil wrote without a hand. Letters scratched my name. Harlan Mason. The page below it read in that clean clerk hand, tender accepted breath. Tape rustled behind the counter. Not duct tape, cloth tape like a tailor uses. It unspooled off an empty hook and swung out slow. It measured the air like a snake tasting it. Numbers faced me. 12, 13, 14. I went for the door. The bolt slid on its own and locked. The knob wouldn't turn. The cloth tape lifted and came for my throat, soft as a kiss, and just before it touched, a voice behind the counter, paper dry and patient, said, "Account holder present." The cloth tape brushed my throat. It felt cool like vinegar and dust. It didn't squeeze, it measured. It slid under my collarbone, around my ribs, under my arm. The little printed numbers didn't make sense. They didn't climb in inches. They flashed in faint red as if lit from inside the cloth. 1, 2, 3, and every number matched the pull and push of my breath. "Don't," I whispered, like you can tell air not to move. A useless word. The floor under me gave a tired creak. The fan house hummed a slow, wet sound the way it did when it rained and the draw pulled right. The ledger's page curled at the corner and lay flat again like something under it was breathing. The pencil lifted. It tapped the paper twice, waiting. The scale on the counter ticked. The arm rose, settled, rose, settled. The needle quivered just under 0. When I exhaled, it clicked over a hair. The cash drawer slid open with a soft ring. I watched a wisp of my breath, white in the cold, leave my mouth and drift toward the register like it knew the way home. "No," I said and clamped my jaw. My chest burned at once. The cloth tape nudged my throat again, gentle. The red numbers on it shook, hungry. The pencil scratched. Accepted. 1. "Take the tokens," I said louder. I shoved the coffee can of script so hard it made a dent in the dust and rang like teeth. "Take all of it. I don't want it." The can slid back an inch. The tokens clinked in a soft, tired laugh. The red pencil on the receipt spool wrote without a hand, "Trade only, not tender." A brass tag fell from the board by the door, just slipped its hook and dropped. It hit the plank floor, bounced once, and spun on its edge toward me like a coin spun by a dealer. It stopped against my boot, number 47. When I bent to grab it, it felt hot. I dropped it with a curse. It stuck to the scuffed leather and smoked a little. I smelled sweet metal like pennies on the tongue. From behind the counter, where the old cages and shelves made shadows deep enough to hide a cow, came a cough I knew. It came out thin as paper, but I knew it. My granddad's cough. It ended in the same sharp little choke he'd get before he said my name. "Mace," said that breath, hardly louder than the fan. "Don't fight it, pay it down. Don't leave it to nobody." "You paid," I said, without knowing I meant to speak. The tape slid across my chest and read the thud of my heart. "They took your whole life." The ledger turned a page. The clerk's hand, neat and square, had never stopped. On one line I saw Levi Harlan. A clean stamp beside it, a circle with a coal pick in the middle, settled. Under that line in the same hand my name, Harlan Mason, balance carried. The register bell chimed twice. The receipt spool fed another inch. A red line walked down it, neat as a wound. Terms printed themselves, but the letters were the old kind, like schoolhouse strokes instead of a printer S, payment in breath, collection at source, collateral, kin. Cold crawled into my teeth. "No," I said. "No, you can have me. Don't touch. I didn't say who. Saying it felt like signing. Account holder present, the voice repeated, mild as a clerk at a counter. Keep current. I tried to hold my breath again. My chest flamed. My head swam. The tape found the soft notch under my ear and hummed there, counting. The scale ticked, tick, tick, charmed by each little exhale I couldn't help. The register chimed on everyone, not loud, almost kind. The pencil wrote, accepted, 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 like footsteps fading down a hallway. I made a choice. I cupped my hand over my mouth and blew hard into my palm, as if I could throw it somewhere that wasn't the register. That thin white wisp slid between my fingers anyway and bent toward the cash drawer like metal to a magnet. The bolt on the door slid. I heard it click. Fresh air, outside air, came through the crack like it wanted me, not the store. The cloth tape slackened a hair. I lunged. The tokens clinked high as I bumped the counter, singing like bad luck. The brass tag skated under my sole and tried to trip me. I stomped and felt it give. The store didn't like that. The hum in the fan house deepened and the slate board hissed like chalk on a cold day. I got a hand on the knob. It was desperately cold. I pulled. The door opened a hand's breadth and stuck, like a palm on the other side pushed back. The tape brushed the back of my neck in a soft, sad pat. Keep current, the voice murmured, right at my ear. I will, I lied and threw my shoulder into it. The wood groaned. I slipped through sideways and fell to my knees on the porch. The world outside smelled like wet leaves and diesel from the county trucks at the highway. I sucked that smell down like it belonged to me. When I looked back, the door was shut. The windows showed only my face and the hills. Driving away, I thought I'd done it. I left the tokens. I left the ledger. I left my name in a book and told myself paper can't walk. That night the house felt too full. The heat ran and made soft blows in the ductwork. Every time the blower kicked on, I heard a tiny bell ring, the same shy chime, and the air felt thinner by a hair. My bathroom mirror fogged when I brushed my teeth, and the fog didn't smear when I wiped it. It left faint lines like figures. The numbers were wrong for temperature. They matched my breaths. One little tally for each one I let go. In the morning, there was a slip of paper on my kitchen table. It wasn't there when I went to bed. It was a receipt the size of a church bookmark, thin and slick with a red line at the bottom. The top read Stonecap Coal Company store account. Below it, in that patient hand, it said, tender accepted breath. Applied to Levi Harlan final. Balance carried Mason Harlan. Due next. When due. Somewhere in the house, a brass tag tinked against metal. The sound came from the cold air return. I bent and shined my phone light down. The duct was dark and clean and far. Down there, something small and round flashed back. A circle, stamped numbers. It slid a little deeper, like it was making room for more. I still hear the fan some nights when the heat turns on. I still find slips with red lines tucked under my wipers or in my coat pocket, and they're warm like somebody kept them in a hand. I keep trying to hold my breath. It doesn't matter. I walk around owing something I can't see. And when my phone rings with no caller ID and a thin voice says, account holder present, I put my hand over my mouth before I answer. I do it without thinking now. But the line always clicks, patient and polite, and a bell rings once in the quiet, because somewhere, somehow, the store already took its due. People in our county say the ridge above Cold Branch bleeds after dark. They say the stone sweats red, and if you stand close, the ground will start breathing with you until you don't know whose chest is doing the work. I always said it was iron water and old talk meant to scare kids off the mine cuts. I went up there to prove it with a map, a compass, and a job that couldn't wait for daylight. I'm a survey hand. I flag lines for timber crews and fix busted corners for folks who lost their fence to floods. A landowner hired me to find his corner pin on the spine folks call the ridge that bled at night. He wanted it set before logging resumed. I told him I'd hike up after supper and be out by 10. He said, "Don't be there at dark." I laughed and said I've been on worse ridges. He did not laugh back. I parked at the last gate and walked the old hall road with my headlamp low. Laurel and rhododendron made black tunnels, wet leaves whispering when my jacket brushed them. Red dog gravel glittered like damp embers. Far downslope a creek talked to itself. The air smelled like wet paper and pennies. Crickets tried, then stopped, then tried again like someone was opening and closing a door on them. I found the old boundary line by the blazes on the beech trees, pale scars where someone had cut the bark clean 30 years back. An iron pin should have been near a flat stone that sat like a table by the cut bank. I set my tripod and checked my bearing. The level bubble quivered though there was no wind. When I lay a hand on the stone to steady myself, heat came up through it, slow and even like a sleeping thing. I pulled back and felt it in my palm for a breath after, the way you feel a stove that was on hours ago. I told myself heat travels better in wet rock. I moved my light and saw the first bead swell out of a crack in the slab. It was red the way a tongue is red, not the way iron in water is red. It trembled, fattened, and slid uphill. Gravity did not matter to it. Another bead pushed out beside it. They walked together, neat as ants, toward the clean patch of lichen near the center of the stone. I watched the red right. A thin line crept, paused, then bent left. An H, another stroke found its place, crooked and careful. An E, the L came easy. The P shook like a child learning where to lift the pencil. The word sat there shining, help. Fresh beads ran over it and smudged the letters, then began again, slower. The strokes spelled home. The last line underlined itself, proud. I said okay, out loud because silence made my ears ring. My voice sounded like it came from the wrong room. A warm breath moved over my cheek. It was not wind. It was one push and one pull, steady as a sleeping animal. I held mine to see. The ridge held too. I let out air. A beat later, that breath came back at me like the hill was learning me. My phone woke in my pocket, though there were no bars. The screen showed a call from unknown, with no time at the top, just a slim green line that said accept. I did not touch it. I could hear breathing without glass. The breath came from the seam where the stone met the bank. I put my fingers there and felt a thin, warm draft that tasted like copper and something sweet beneath it, wrong as flowers in a closed room. I took a step back and my heels sank. Not far, just enough for the ground to say, I feel you. Warm slick climbed through leaf rot and lace, through leather, through sock, and found the bone. I yanked. The earth held a half-second longer than earth should and then let go with a soft pop, polite as a hand that wants to learn your shape. Heat stayed around my ankle like a cuff. On the slab, 2 handprints rose under the skin of red. One was my size, beside it smaller, missing the little finger. Both smoothed away without a ripple. In the cut bank behind the stone, a hairline seam widened the width of a credit card and breathed. The out-breath carried grit that kissed my knuckles like salt. The in-breath listened. A voice rode that warmth, quiet as someone calling through a quilt. It said my last name and got the middle wrong, then closer, practicing. It said, "Are you there?" in a tone my dad used when he sat on the edge of my bed and did not want to scare me awake. I did not answer. My radio on the hip belt clicked. In my own voice, a breath late, it said, "Don't be there at dark." I lifted my tripod in a hurry. The level bubble slid all the way to one side, though the legs were even. Red threads had climbed the aluminum without noise and lay along the legs like veins. Where they touched, the metal felt warm through my glove. The threads trailed back to the seam in the bank, thin as fishing line, the way a spider runs lines before it pulls them tight. The seam opened a little wider and took a slow breath in. It tugged at my face like a soft hand over my mouth, patient, learning me. The red threads on my tripod tightened, then loosened, like they were seeing how much they could take without breaking. Warm air slid out of the seam and tasted my knuckles with grit, then drew back with a faint, wet sound, as if it had lipped somewhere in the rock. I told myself to finish the job. I scraped at the cut bank for the corner pin, shallow passes, no hero work. My trowel rang on iron. Relief hit me so hard I laughed. I brushed mud until a pin's round head showed, black with years. When I gripped it to wiggle it free, it pulsed. It was warm. It beat with my beat. My glove jumped in time with me. "Not mine," I said without meaning to. The seam answered with a breath that matched my words a half-second late. On the slab, the red wrote my last name again, steadier this time, and underlined it like a teacher. The pin wouldn't budge. I dug around it and hit nothing but heat. The metal hummed up my wrist like a tuning fork. My phone lit with that same call from unknown, no time. The accept bar slid on its own to answer, and in the hush I heard my dad's voice made thin by distance say, "Are you there?" It sounded careful, like he didn't want to wake me. Behind it, another voice, older, said, "Don't be there at dark." My radio, still clipped to my belt, clicked and repeated that line in my voice, slow and flat, a breath behind. I yanked the tripod free and the red threads clung like wet hair. I snapped a leg closed and used it as a lever against the pin. The metal groaned. The seam breathed in, pleased. The breath pressed my cheeks, slid to the corner of my lips, and tried that way, sweet and copper. I turned my face and tasted it anyway. The ground took my heel, not much, just enough to let me know it remembered me. Warmth climbed my boot, slow as syrup, and found the place where the bone sits shallow. I stabbed with my trowel and hit nothing but heat and slick. A handprint rose under the skin of red on the slab, my size, and beside it, smaller, missing the little finger. Both pressed flat as if they were testing a window for give. "Enough," I said to nobody. I let the pin go. The hum in the metal eased like disappointment. The breath did not quit. It matched my lungs, kind as rain, patient. It said my name right this time, the way my dad had said it when I was small and half asleep. I put the tripod on my shoulder and backed down the track. Red threads tugged, then let go, leaving warm streaks on the aluminum that would not cool. The path to my truck had gone slick and wrong. Thin skins lay in the ruts. They rippled when I stepped, then smoothed themselves. At my salt line, the beads drew up, shivered like a dog hit a low fence, and split to find a root. I dumped the last crystals, and the line brightened like a chalk mark in school. The breath pressed right against it and went flat, as if the hill had put its face to glass. I reached the truck, and the handle felt like a living thing. Inside, the windshield fogged on the wrong side, and a handprint bloomed there, big as mine. A smaller print touched beside it, missing one finger. Both slid down toward the vent and faded. The radio woke to a low hum that stayed when I turned it off. The hum lived in the steering column, in the doors, in the thin places of the cab where metal meets air. I rolled slow. The tires floated a hair. The ridge breathed with me all the way to the gate. When I eased onto county blacktop, the hum thinned and the warmth at my ankles cooled. I did not look back. Home should have felt safe. It didn't. I set the tripod by the door and went straight to the sink, hands shaking. My water ran clear, then pinked a hair, then cleared again, like it had tried something and changed its mind. I spat copper anyway. When I wiped the bathroom mirror, lines stayed in the fog long enough to spell home, and then my last name with the spelling right. My data gear chirped on the table. I had not turned it on. The little screen showed a point marked corner. The coordinates were not the ridge. They were my house. I lifted the receiver and the numbers walked with me across the room in tiny jumps, like a nervous animal. I set it down and the point settled under the chair where I stood. I told myself it was a glitch. I carried the unit outside to the porch. The point followed and set itself exactly at my feet. I stepped off the porch and the mark came with me into the yard. The gear thought the corner pin was wherever I was. The ridge had set me, not the stone. I went back in and locked the door like a child. Warm air moved from the floor vent and found the soft spot under my ear, counting. In that breath was a man's tired voice, not unkind. It said, "Keep breathing." Another voice said, "Don't let it out." In the mirror over the sink, a handprint fogged up from the wrong side of the glass. Big as mine, smaller beside it, missing a finger. Both slid down toward the drain and vanished as if space had opened for them there. I do not know where that corner pin is now. My gear tells me it is wherever I am standing. The ridge has time. It waits at my vents. It answers my breath a heartbeat late. Some nights in the quiet, my own voice calls my name from the hall like I'm a boy again, careful, kind, practicing. I keep my mouth covered like a fool and try not to answer. The house smells copper and flowers where there are no flowers. The seam under the hill is open as long as I am, and I have to breathe sometime. That's where we leave the ridge line tonight. A whistle that finished itself, a store that still rings its little bell, and a hill that times your lungs a heartbeat late. If you felt the breath on your neck, tell me which story clung to you the hardest in the comments. Share this with the one friend who would still answer a call from the dark. Tap subscribe and turn on the bell so you never walk alone into the next tale from these mountains. Until then, keep your name in your mouth, your radio quiet after midnight, and your windows latched. Sleep light. The hills remember.